You know what?
Yes.
I hate myself. I see this inside of me. Like I know that there's a part of me that deep down that I could have been that guy. You know? And it's just like I want to join Opus Dei and just start beating myself.
It's perfect because we sit and we consume this character, like whether it's the Democratic Party leadership or the New York Times or MSNBC or like this thing that you're embodying, we have to deal with constantly in every way. It was like a couple of weeks ago. Do you know who Joe Lockhart is?
Yeah, the lobbyist for the health insurance company.
Yeah, this guy, he co-founded Glover Park Group after he was, I think he was Bill Clinton's press secretary. He co-founded a firm called Glover Park Group, which has worked for everything from the health insurance industry to the Saudi royal family to Verizon to they were also a big part of the Pete Peterson's cut the deficit austerity thing. And now he's on CNN. And what I also love is that he hosts a podcast called Words Matter, which is just incredible. It's like, you know, this whole like fake news, people don't trust things world might have something to do with the industry that you were a pioneer of, my friend. And he put a tweet out where he said, you know, Bernie just, you know, he hasn't been scrutinized yet. And he's really good because he reminds everybody that he's a balls and strikes CNN analyst. And he's had plenty of good things to say about Bernie. And I quote tweeted it, and I said something to the effect of like, obviously it's ridiculous, and also maybe the co-founder of Glover Park Group will not be so thrilled about, you know, Bernie's electoral agenda. And his response, which was something to the effect of like, you know, some type of middling response about Bernie, you know, not getting scrutinized, whatever. And then the only other part about Glover Park Group was just, he was just, as for my record, feel free to criticize. Yeah, it's just perfect. Like, I just said you work for Verizon and the fucking Saudis. And they're like, well, feel free.
There is this really weird myth that's been going around for like at least 5 years as they've been criticizing Brenda. He's yet to be vetted. And it's hard to interpret that as anything other than like them expecting for this weird like bombshell, like, oh, he used prison labor at his Arkansas mansion to just come out and blow. Because like I think that people have been conditioned by like their terrible candidates that they support to have like these huge like otherwise disqualifying things come out, but being sort of, you know, shackled to the Democratic Party or Republican Party and having to ignore them. So like they're expecting that for Bernie, and like it's just not going to happen.
It's not. And then the things they think it's going to be, it's like the people who see him in a Soviet sauna are either going to be like, this is horrible, he's a communist, in which case that guy's already voting for Trump, or they're going to be like us and be like, can we use this to promote our Bell House show? That's kind of awesome.
Yeah, what was it the week before the Warren thing dropped? It was they were criticizing him because he had a child out of wedlock and skipped Vietnam. Yeah, and everyone was like, yeah, that's awesome. It's like he fucks and fucked the army. Like, yeah, like exactly.
Right, yeah, like what you weren't supposed to fight in Vietnam.
It's just that's the wrong thing to do. But I think that just goes back to
and
what
also like out of wedlock. Like, are you kidding? Like, some people should look at some stats.
I don't know. I mean,
this country.
Vietnam was obviously an atrocity, but I think that the liberal class specifically, like that's not even liberal, but the centrist Democrat class, they take a certain amount of pride in their ability to like criticize things but go along with them anyway. Yes. Where it's like there's this very weird dynamic where they are incredibly, because like as Feldman made very clear by his bit, sorry, I don't know but the word for it, like they are comfortable. And so like they feel very comfortable in stepping outside of that system, and at least in their own opinion, and criticizing it, but then just swimming along with the current and not making waves. And they feel still like that ability to criticize but not change or not engage in any kind of action to change the problem that they're acknowledging outside of in the most minor ways is sufficient. Like it's a sufficient mechanism for changing. For like at least it's a sufficient enough to give them a level of moral superiority within our society that they feel differentiates them from the Republican Party.
Right.
Well, now you know what it is when you watch the debates. I noticed something. All the Democrats now are willing to state the problem, and they're even now willing to state the cause of the problem. but they're not willing to state the solution, except Bernie. And that, to me, is, I think it's worse than Trump. I think for, Biden and Klobuchar and, Elizabeth Warren to go all the way up to the edge of income inequality and, health care, but not take the leap to the solution, that's just sinful, because that just lulls the Democratic Party into, being self-satisfied. Yes, I know there's a homeless problem. Yes, it's terrible.
Right.
And it's caused by, the mental health problem. And yes, and it's caused by, rents are too high. Yes, it's terrible. It's terrible. But what do we do about it? Well, that's complicated.
No, exactly. I think that's exactly. I have to just, actually make your point, and I'm going to go on a quick tangent before we get off.
Well, I mean, I think that that dynamic you're describing is why we're in the situation that we're in, both when it comes to the Democratic Party's relationship with the Republican Party and also their relationship with Bernie Sanders. It's like when you want to score points by simply acknowledging the problem, like weaponizing the silence of the Republican Party on things like racism or sexism or like homelessness or mental health or any of these like sort of numerous societal issues we have, you have to kind of be, essentially using a far right party as your foil, people who won't even acknowledge the existence of these problems. So then you come out ahead, you say, hey, you know what? You see those stupid, morons on the far right. Forget the fact that they basically roll us every week. Forget that they roll us every week.
You know those fucking idiots who beat us all the time?
Who like just fucking like who just fucking
those morons who win every single major conflict we have with
who
them.
hand us our ass every week. You know those people? Like they don't even believe in racism or sex. They don't even know what intersectionality is. But we do. We're the smart, we're the morally righteous, the morally superior party, and they're just the dumbest.
But that's the psychic payoff. That's another problem, is that so many people in that coalition, on the comfortable parts of the coalition, that's all they want. Yeah, they don't care about the material change.
Because then the fact that's the emotional component of it. But what that does, it creates a very hostile relationship with the far left, the people to the left of them, if not like friendly, a rivalry with the far right, because those people can be used as an intellectual and moral foil, because they're like the entire basis for their disagreement exist on the symbolic level. It can be okay, we acknowledge that racism is a problem. We acknowledge this, but using climate change as an example, it's like they want to do the same thing with climate change. They want to say we acknowledge the science of climate change. The Republican Party, they're stupid. They lack the intelligence. They're scientifically illiterate. They think that dinosaurs lived 1,000 years ago. We acknowledge the climate change, the science of climate change. We believe the consensus of those scientists. Well, what do you want to do about it? It's like, well, the Green New Deal. That's a little bit far. That's a little bit, radical. We would, like carbon tax or some kind of offset. We'll plant a tree for every mountain we strip mine. Like that, like acknowledging the science of climate change, but then not really having the same level of, essentially drive to stop it. It doesn't make you seem smarter than the far right. It makes you seem dumber. Like makes you seem dumber to say, I acknowledge the problem and the scope of the problem and the cause of the problem, but I'm not really in favor of the solution.
It's coherent. I mean, it's coherent. I have to just say really quick before we get off. I saw one time, I wish I could remember the context, but also the other thing about liberals in Vietnam is there's this like weird, because they're establishment about it, and they can't just acknowledge that the thing was evil and a structural part of U.S. foreign policy or whatever. They have this. A lot of them who didn't go and fight really have this weird inferiority complex. That's why they had this bizarre worship of people like John McCain, and that's why they thought that John Kerry would be a slam dunk over George W. Bush, even though George W. Bush was like, hey, yeah, I got out of it. Now you're windsurfing, pussy. Which is how it actually works in real politics. But I remember one time on Hardball.
What? I'd rather be in Da Nang than have to sleep with Teresa Hines. But go ahead.
I actually disagree with that. I watched there was a Hardball once, and somebody, Chris Matthews was on some like Vietnam contingent, and I forget the guests, but she kind of was just like, basically doing the sort of like thing that you do at Matthews where you're just like, okay, I don't know about that, Chris. I think maybe blah, 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 blah. And he's just like, no, Vietnam was a very deep thing, particularly for the men of that generation. It's a certain thing. It's an emotional resonance, and it was Vietnam. And anyways, it was Vietnam, and that's why there's John McCain.
Right. That impression was so good, my ear is covered in spit. I don't know how you did that. Hey, you know what? I know you want to.
We got to run, David.
Finish, but can I just make a suggestion?
Sure.
And I'm being serious.
Yes.
Forget Medicare for all. VA, Veterans Affairs for all. Bring back the draft. And not just because I hate my children. Everybody should have to serve in the military or the Peace Corps or AmeriCorps. 2 years of your life. Everybody in public service. You do that, and then you're entitled to VA benefits. So it should be VA for all.
All right, David. This is very. I see you at the pavilion watching a JFK speech right now. David,
I don't get.
That was very 60s.
Oh, in Milwaukee?
Yeah, some. I don't know. It's just very JFK of you. Anyways, David Feldman. I love you.
I love you, guys.
Subscribe.
Are we still on, or is this
All right, bye-bye. Subscribe to the David Feldman Show. He's such a troll. Subscribe to the David Feldman Show on iTunes. You just watched a Michael Brooks Show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.